Hello MCU fans! Today's going to be my breakdown review of Marvel Zombies, including timeline placement, Easter egg, and much, much more. So there will obviously be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget we have a September contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, you could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. Plus, hang around to the end of the video, and we'll talk about the Doomsday Countdown rewatch on the Discord. Alright, so let's start by talking about the timeline placement poll that I did on the channel. I asked people where do they think Marvel Zombies will show up on the Disney Plus timeline. 1,300 people voted, and the number one choice was right after What If Season 1, followed by won't appear on the timeline at all. And I did a video myself on where I thought all of Phase 6 was going to be placed in the timeline, and for Marvel Zombies, I chose between What If and WandaVision. And it turns out, in this case, I got it right, as did the majority of folks, although I'm not so sure I'm going to get the Fantastic Four placement right. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But anyway, notice it also showed up in Marvel Animation and in the Multiverse Saga section, plus they have a brand new section for Halloween, I'm assuming, called Marvel Monsters, and it showed up there. Alright, so let's talk about why I think it was placed where it was. There actually are two reasons they might have done this. The first is obvious. It's a follow-up on What If Season 1, episode number 5, so sure, put it right after What If Season 1. But also consider that the branching point for that What If episode was spring of 2018, and of course we learn in the episodes that we're jumping 5 years into the future to 2023. Well, now if you look up at the timeline, it's right there in 2023. So, okay, I'm kind of curious. Which do you think is the reason it was placed there, or maybe was it both? Really interesting. All right, so now on to the breakdown. And I'm going to put things in timeline order across all the different episodes. And in fact, I'm going to integrate a little bit of the What If episode in as well, because I just think it's easier to understand that way. So we actually jump back 5 years ago because most of the Marvel Zombie episodes are, of course, taking place in 2023. But 5 years ago in 2018, we learned that Janet Van Dyne contracted the quantum virus in the quantum realm, and that corrupted her brain, obviously turning her into a zombie. And when she returned back home again, we saw that both Hank and Janet infected, well, they tried to infect Hope. She got away, but they definitely infected Scott. And of course, we'll see him again later. And then I really like the fact that the Marvel Zombies episodes give us some more context about the immediate chaos after that What If episode. Notice there's a giant explosion at the Pym Labs, and I'm assuming that's what created, well, this, right? These people are now huge because probably those Pym particles flew everywhere across the city, turning, this dude giant, but also turning this zombie giant. So that's pretty crazy, right? And then we also see that Jimmy Woo is on the case. Remember, he was tracking Scott Lang, not very effectively, but he was tracking him in Ant-Man and the Wasp, so it makes sense that he's there. And then we see that Wenwu and the Death Dealer arrive. Of course, we learn from the Shang-Chi movie that Wenwu was keeping an eye on his son to make sure he was safe, and obviously with this zombie apocalypse happening, he realized he needed to take action to save him. But it was a little too late because unfortunately Shaun got bit. So this is interesting. Wenwu ultimately gives the rings over to Shaun to stop the spread of the virus. These rings are really powerful. I cannot wait to learn more about them, hopefully in Doomsday, but that was fascinating. So Wenwu unfortunately perishes, but it's the Death Dealer coming to the rescue, an unexpected ally, because he was not real friendly to Shang-Chi in the movie. But anyway, they get away, and of course we learned from the What If episode that the virus quickly spread, because the Watcher explains within 24 hours, the entire Pacific Northwest was infected. And ironically, it was the Avengers' heroism that sealed humanity's fate. And of course, it's important that Black Panther is over there on the right, because as we learn in the What If episode, he was rescued by Vision, but that was ultimately so he could be fed to Wanda. Yikes. So yeah, this definitely becomes a problem because now the Avengers become infected, and as the Watcher explains, once Earth's mightiest heroes joined the infected, no one else stood a chance. And then the What If episode showed us that Bruce crashed down to Earth like at the beginning of Infinity War, shouting Thanos is coming, but there was a much bigger threat, because yep, the Avengers have been zombified. We see Wong, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man have all been turned into zombies. Then we get the rest of the episode, but of course things ended with Spider-Man, Scott Lang's head, and T'Challa heading to Wakanda, hopefully with a cure. Hopefully the Mind Stone was going to allow them to stop the zombie virus, but instead they're facing a much worse fate because zombie Thanos is waiting for them. And notice he has 5 of the Infinity Stones, and all he needs left is the Mind Stone. And of course, this is where the What If episode left off and the Marvel Zombies series picks up. And I'm going to pick up at that exact point because I want to show something really important. Notice in the upper right-hand corner, yep, the Watcher is tuning in. He knows this is really important. In fact, now we have seen the Watcher in, well, I Am Groot. We've seen him in X-Men 97, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and even Eyes of Wakanda. So yeah, he's shown up in all 5 of the Marvel animated shows. So very cool. Dude gets around, right? All right, so now it's time for a face-off with Thanos. So our main 3 heroes jump into action, but they're joined by some very powerful allies because in comes Thor with Stormbreaker and, of course, Groot and Rocket. However, unfortunately, Thor once again doesn't go for the head. Dude needs to learn his lesson. Go for the head. And because he doesn't, they pay an awful price. Rocket and Groot are incinerated, and Thor is badly injured and basically left for dead. And then we see a very noble sacrifice by the Black Panther. So Spider-Man is basically narrating and says, I heard T'Challa say, Wakanda forever, quietly, like he knew it was for the last time. Wow, I thought this was a really nice touch, because obviously Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P., would have voiced Black Panther in this episode if he was still alive. But with him having passed away, they kept Black Panther silent, did not give him any audio, and instead it was Spider-Man narrating what happened. I thought that was just beautiful. Anyway, he makes this noble sacrifice and knocks zombie Thanos back into basically the heart of Wakanda, the vibranium core. And that creates a massive explosion, right? Creates this huge, massive storm because of the release of the energy of the stones. And basically, it just blows everything away, warping the fabric of reality around everything. So luckily for both Spider-Man and Scott Lang's head, they're rescued by some timely portals and brought to Kamar-Taj. And they meet with Rinta, the London Master, and Sarah. Of course, we saw Sarah get killed during Multiverse of Madness, and Rinta had a pretty small role in the movie, so it was nice to see Rinta kick some butt during Marvel Zombies. So then we learn more about what happened there in Wakanda. The infinity energy had to be contained somehow because it was raging unchecked, right? The storm was destroying everything in its path. And so the Hulk was sent in to take the infinity energy into his form, as they explain it. Basically, we learned in Endgame that the infinity stones emit gamma radiation, so it makes sense that he would be able to absorb that infinity energy. We just never thought we would see something as crazy as this, right? And so the last we saw him, he was locked in battle with zombie Wanda in the What If episode, so obviously he must have survived that. But anyway, now he is no longer Bruce Banner or the Hulk. Basically, he is now an anchor protecting energies that could make or destroy worlds. And I'm really glad they did not call him an anchor being, because I just think that is such a confusing concept. I kind of hope we don't hear it again after Deadpool and Wolverine. But anyway, we now know that he is protecting all of us. All right, so now we jump 5 years later, which is kind of interesting. That's the same amount of time we jumped in Endgame. So now we move to 2023. So let's see what everybody's doing in that time frame. So first of all, we get this nice little Young Avengers tease, right? We have Ironheart, Kamala, and Kate Bishop. I'm telling you, this show has to happen. Either Young Avengers or Champions, I don't care what it's called, but they keep teasing it. Now, whether it's before or after Secret Wars, that's the big question. But I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Anyway, we see that they're under attack from zombie Hawkeye. He's looking menacing as always. And remember, we last saw him in the What If episode. He did survive, so it makes sense he's still around. But they do eventually escape from him. And now we learn how on earth Kamala became Miss Marvel in 2023 instead of 2025. Well, it just turns out that her nanny had a feeling that she should send the bangle. So she basically had intuition to send it earlier than she sent it in the sacred timeline. And sure enough, now she's Miss Marvel. And we see that both Riri and Kate became superheroes sooner in this branch. I mean, Riri didn't become Ironheart in the sacred timeline until 2025. And of course, Kate became Hawkeye in 2024. But they just became heroes earlier in this branch. And we learn that Riri has stolen Tony Stark's armor off of his headless body. Because, of course, he was beheaded in the What If episode after he became a zombie. And we see that it's very helpful that Kate has a rich mom because they're hanging out in Eleanor Bishop's estate as their hideout. Love that. And we see they're studying this transmitter that they found in the stomach of a zombie, but they need to get to the SHIELD network to learn more about it, and the closest one is in Ohio. So, okay, they're off on a journey, but oh my, the team pays a high price along the way because they get in the middle of this battle between Icarus and Captain Marvel. That was incredible. They have a lot of who would win type fights, and this one has lasted for years. But unfortunately, Kate Bishop is killed in this battle. In fact, you can see her skeleton, basically her skull, as she is incinerated by Captain Marvel's blast. So yikes. And we also see that Riri is in trouble because she gets bit by a zombie and infected. But this is a very easy to miss detail. Notice she says, oh, this is not how I wanted to test this. And she injects herself with something. So Is it a potential cure for the zombie virus that she wasn't sure if it worked yet or not? Or is it just something to hold off someone that's being infected? We don't know, but I'll tell you, this is a really important point. Keep this in mind because it will explain something at the end of the episodes. And we also see that Riri's AI goes back to help her. She says, I lost my first owner. I won't lose another. So this is another big hint that Riri is going to survive. And again, we'll see her later. And then good news for Kamala, she was rescued by the epic combination of Moon Knight and Blade. He was such a great character in this series, and in fact, he was even hinted during What If Season 3 when they showed us all the different characters that might exist in What If branches. So we learned that his avatar was lost in the plague. Of course, he's referring to Mark Spector, and that now the deity, Khonshu, acts through me. Now, at least in the sacred timeline, we learned that Mark Spector became Moon Knight in 2022, which was during the blip in the sacred timeline. So if it happened in the same point in time in this branch, then poor Mark Spector was only Moon Knight for a year. Yikes. So now they're headed to the North Institute because Blade knows that's where someone can help Kamala with her transmitter. And of course, we heard about the North Institute from the Black Widow movie. It was actually sabotaged and set on fire by Alexei and Melina on their secret mission. So it only makes sense we're going to see them at that same location in Marvel Zombies, right? Because, sure enough, there's this group of very obedient zombies that basically move aside to make a path, and sure enough, we see that it's Melina who has got them under control with her neurological agent developed to control humans, but also to control pigs, as we know from the Black Widow movie. But sure enough, Yelena, Melina, and Alexei are all there. And in fact, Melina helps her figure out that this transmitter is meant to contact the Nova Corps. Okay, this part confused me a bit, right? Because I thought we learned from Infinity War that Thanos has the Power Stone, as you can see in his glove, and as a result, that he basically destroyed Xandar. I mean, Thor sure made it sound like Thanos put the beat down on Xandar. But we're going to see in a minute that the Nova Corps still exist. Okay, so that could mean one of two things. It could mean that in the sacred timeline, Xandar isn't destroyed after all. We never saw it happening in Infinity War. Or it could mean that things just went down differently in this branch. So let me know your thoughts. What is this telling us about Xandar and the Nova Corps in the sacred timeline? I will point out, though, that things must have gone down very differently in the What If episode, because notice Thanos' thumb, he has the Time Stone, yet Doctor Strange never went to Titan to give it to him like in the sacred timeline. Instead, he was turned into a zombie well before that. So, okay, bottom line, what does this tell us about Xandar in the sacred timeline? That's what I'm really curious about. So next we learned from Melina that the fallout from the Wakanda event scattered signals across the atmosphere. And we'll discover more of what she's talking about there in a minute. But the bottom line is they're going to have to go into outer space to be able to use the transmitter. Unfortunately, Zombie Okoye is now ready to lead an attack against them. And remember, the last we saw of her was in the What If episode when she was pulled back by Zombie Wanda and obviously turned into a zombie at that point. And we also see Zombie Abomination, and man, the dude was epic. But one of the MVPs has to be Zombie Cap's torso, making a return, fighting with Red Guardian. He finally gets that battle with Captain America. And for the record, even half a Captain America was still pretty awesome. But yeah, he's only half a Captain America because, of course, he was cut in half during the What If episode. And also Zombie Ghost. Oh my word, what a boss, right? She and Moon Knight Blade were awesome. But of course, he gets the upper hand and takes her out. So obviously Ghost was in San Francisco during the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie, so she was probably immediately turned into a zombie after the outbreak. Well, it turns out Melina doesn't make it out alive. She tries to stay back and hold off the zombies unsuccessfully. And Red Guardian tries to console Yelena by saying we honor her with every breath we take. Oh man, but the heartbreak is not over between these two. All right, so then we catch up with Shaun and Katy, and it seems like they've joined this like Road Warrior Mad Max type troupe, and of course they're doing karaoke just like in the Shang-Chi movie, singing Journey, and then we see they're attacked by a gang of Skrulls. Of course, we know from the Secret Invasion show that there's a ton of Skrulls on Earth, so it would make sense that now during the zombie apocalypse, they don't care anymore. They're just out in the open, right? But I love this Easter egg because one of the members of the Road Warrior crew is saying, oh, the Skrulls are trying to steal our cows. That is a sweet Easter egg, all the way back to Fantastic Four #2, when part of the plot of the comic was that they hypnotized Skrulls into thinking they were cows, and they stayed in cow form, and that's how they defeated them. So who knows? These cows could actually be Skrulls. That is hilarious. Well, anyway, Shang-Chi and his Road Warrior crew are headed to the New Orleans seaport because, as they explain, it's one of the last safe places on Earth, and therefore it's bound to draw a crowd. Well, it does draw a crowd because we see Blade, Yelena, Alexei, and Kamala are there as well. But the one that everyone has to kiss up to is Zemo himself. Yes, Baron Zemo is back, and he wants some cows. And so does Walker. I love the fact that Walker is working with Zemo. So what's the deal with Zemo? When the zombie outbreak occurred, he was sitting on the raft in prison. So it makes sense that he would now be running the raft. I love it, calling it the City on the Sea. All right, so everyone gets on board, and we learn something interesting about Blade. He says, I no longer consume blood. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this. Is that because Khonshu has taken him over as his avatar and helped him fend off the need for blood? Or has he come up with synthetic blood like we saw in the movies? Just a small little thing that I was kind of curious about. But we also see that Jimmy Woo is still displaying his close-up magic. I absolutely love that, pulling salt from behind Red Guardian. And Kamala is explaining to everyone about their journey. Once they get to space, they can send a signal to the Nova Corps, and as Blade explains, there's a spacecraft at New Asgard, and that's where we're going. But first, they have to survive an attack from Talakon. Oh my word, it's so wild that they all got changed into zombies underwater, right? And so now they're swimming up to attack the raft. And of course, if you see members from Talakon, you're going to also have to deal with Namor himself. And he was absolutely epic. So cool. So we're treated to an epic battle, but unfortunately, Yelena has to make the sacrifice play and stay behind so that everybody else can escape. She says, I'm going down with the ship, I'm afraid. But it's okay, this is a good death. And of course, that's a reference back to the Black Widow movie, where she was trying to decide what would be a good death. Well, obviously, for her, this is a good death, saving everyone. And then, oh my goodness, tugging at our heartstrings, right? I love you, Daddy. Oh my gosh, the two of these together, just like in Thunderbolts, get me every single time. I love their relationship. So amazing. All right, good news is her sacrifice was not in vain because everyone is able to arrive at New Asgard. Doesn't look quite as welcoming as it did in Endgame, right? Welcome to New Asgard. Instead, now we have Valkyrie standing up there saying, you're not welcome here. Leave. Ooh. So I don't think they would have even gotten in if not for the fact that Khonshu himself makes an appearance saying, basically, you're not going to let a god in? And she's like, oh, Khonshu, like he's the best bud. So I love that. That was a really cool way to get them inside. And now that they are inside, it's time for a feast. Red Guardian says, I eat to honor Yelena, Melina, and the widows. Going to turn out this is not the best way to honor them, though, because that's not really a feast. But we'll get to that in a second, right? We also see that Thor is very depressed after his defeat by Thanos, which is similar to what happened in Endgame, although instead of, overeating like he did in that, he just sits. He just sits and mourns. So we also learn that the Queen of Sokovia, has come to share the bounty of her kingdom. Well, the group all realizes who that queen is. That is Zombie Wanda, and they are ready for a fight. But wait, that doesn't seem to be Zombie Wanda at all. She explains we have much to discuss. I regained my ability to sculpt reality. So I did. Of course, that's a big hint that if she can sculpt reality, that this is fake, right? But anyway, she says, just as my gifts could heal the world. So her goal is to heal everything. The Wakanda event released infinite energies, enough to reshape the world, but someone stole it for themselves. And of course, she's referring to Infinity Hulk, which we already learned about. So we then see that Wanda is indeed tricking everyone, and what she wants is a zombie army. And if you think about it, an army of Asgardian zombies, oh my word, that might be enough to take on Infinity Hulk. So we see that all along, everyone has been eating zombie guts and innards and fingers even. And unfortunately, that means he too is going to slowly turn into a zombie. Well, obviously carnage ensues, right? We lose Jimmy, we lose Zemo, and the Death Dealer. Oh my word, this was such an incredible fight. And sure enough, Red Guardian now goes full zombie mode, so he too is lost. All right, so then everybody heads to a familiar ship. We remember this from Ragnarok, right? That's the Grandmaster's party ship. But as they try to take off, Wanda pulls them back, saying, Kamala, the hope you seek is down here with me. We can heal the world. Now, they don't really explain in the episodes why Wanda needs Kamala. I'm sure it has something to do with her bangles, though. So, yeah, maybe her bangles are more powerful than we ever realized. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Thank goodness for everybody, Thor finally breaks out of his funk, right? And does a huge attack on Wanda. I love all these boss fights, these who would win type fights, because now we see Thor going full on with Wanda. But we don't really get the resolution to the fight for now, because he says, go now, to let them escape as he fights off Wanda. So now they're heading towards outer space, and we learn a little bit more about the fallout from this Wakanda event, because it turns out that there's literally like energy covering the entire Earth because of the Infinity Stones, exploding in that storm. But once they clear that, now they're able to key sync the comm to the same frequency and reach out to the Nova Corps. Good news, right? Well, maybe not, because it turns out the Nova Corps is already there, right? They were already here the whole time, and that can't be good. And they explain, attention craft, return to your world. And they aren't very sociable because they say any attempt to flee the planet will be met with incineration. And because they don't leave soon enough, well, you now fall under disinfection protocols. And those disinfection protocols, well, pretty much mean we're going to destroy you. So I'll give them credit. I mean, what they're doing makes sense. They're preventing the spread of the zombie plague, but they're doing it by obliterating anything trying to leave. So again, I'm back to this question. Did the Nova Corps not get wiped out when Thanos got the Power Stone? I mean, obviously not in this branch, but I'm really curious about the sacred timeline. All right, so their ship is destroyed, but Kamala creates a little hard light bubble that they're in, for now at least. And a fun little callback to Love and Thunder when Valkyrie says, I wonder if this is considered dying in battle, because of course you don't get into Valhalla unless you die in battle. But unfortunately, Kamala's hard light construct is destroyed, and it's only the timely appearance of some portals that sends everyone to Kamar-Taj to join the rest of the team. We finally see Spider-Man and, well, Scott Lang's head. As he says, it's weird, but you'll get used to it. Maybe. But Blade asks the question we all want to know, so this is the part where you tell us why we're here. So we get the bad news. Wanda has now gathered an army strong enough to defeat Banner. Remember those Asgardian zombies, right? She is now super powerful. And we all need to join together to fight for the fate of the planet. So they have to decide, do they want to be part of this battle or not? Because, oh my word, the zombies, they are totally ready for a battle. And I love that whenever you see their red eyes, you know that Wanda has got them under her control, and she is ready to take the Hulk down. Of course, he's not going to go down easy. I mean, he's got the Infinity Stones energy flowing through him. So you might say to yourself, well, couldn't he just snap his fingers and change all of reality? I'm guessing it's very, very hard to control. I mean, the gauntlet is what let you focus their power. He basically is the stones, and the best he can do is hold them back and hold them together. So I think that explains why he wasn't able to do, snap your fingers and fix everything. But anyway, everyone is ganging up on the Hulk. They're all just pounding on him. They're blasting him from space with the Asgardian ships. And we see that Wanda uses that moment to be very persuasive. She says, it's a burden, isn't it, to hold all this power. So she almost has him. She's just about to reach in when, boom, our team arrives, right? And they play the Avengers theme, which was just perfect. Chef's kiss. So yeah, we see some butt-kicking battle here. I love how Kamala uses her hard light to basically sever the heads of a ton of zombies. This shot was so cool with Khonshu being reflected in Moon Knight Blade there. And this was a great move to basically turn the ship's fire against themselves, redirecting the fire back on the ships and destroying them. And of course, you gotta love this shot of Spider-Man just demolishing a ton of zombies. So stinking cool, right? But this was such a sad reunion. Scott and Hope seeing each other again for the first time as he looks up, Hope. And of course, the last he saw Hope was when she made that sacrifice play in What If. So man, many very painful reunions. And then we see Thor arrive, and he is indeed now a zombie, and he wants to take Infinity Hulk down. So we get a rematch of their fight from Thor Ragnarok, a lot of the same moves, but ultimately Infinity Hulk beats down zombie Thor and does a move that, well, even John Cena with WWE would be proud of as he smushes Thor. Oh, that was really gross. That was really gross. But Wanda uses this moment to make her move. She zips in and shoves her hand into the Infinity Energy and starts to absorb it. However, we learn once again that she needs Kamala. She says, we were meant to be here to end this together. You help me bring them all back. Take my hand. She explains, you can still save the world like you always wanted. And at this point, Spider-Man's my favorite hero, so I'm like, okay, Kamala, just do it. I don't want to see Spider-Man get beheaded. No, do something, please. So sure enough, she does indeed reach out and take Wanda's hand. And notice on the right there, you can see the bangle just kind of sparkling, the energy coming off of it. So I'm betting those bangles are way more powerful than we might have ever guessed. Same with the 10 rings, right? Remember, they actually helped stop the zombie virus from taking over Shang-Chi. So hopefully in Doomsday, we're being set up for the fact that both of these artifacts are extremely powerful. Cannot wait to learn more about them in that movie. All right, so we see now that Wanda is ready to reshape the world, and so the world begins again. And sure enough, the whole world, literally, just the reality warps around it and changes to, well, something new, as we'll see. And notice in the upper left-hand corner there, those are the Xandar ships going, we weren't told what to do in this situation. So anyway, we now see that Kamala seems to have a happy ending, right? Her mom's saying, wake up, come down, because your friends are here. And there's Riri and Kate saying, hey, hi, how you doing? So they head off to get something to drink, and notice Kamala remembers everything. She says, I've literally gone like 5 years without boba. And they're like, we got boba yesterday. So obviously no one else remembers what happened, but Kamala remembers. Then she looks over and sees, well, she says it herself, a very, very cute guy. I think this is meant to be Kamran that, of course, we saw in the Ms. Marvel show. But it turns out all is not as it seems, because we shift back and forth between this very peaceful scene and this absolutely horrific scene, right? I thought that was really effective, how they just kind of jump back and forth. And in fact, we ultimately see Riri, right? She's saying, can you hear me? And then this is fascinating. She says, Kamala, I've hacked the assumingly signal, which is very similar to WandaVision when Jimmy Woo hacked through Wanda's hex, to communicate with the people inside. Well, now we see Ironheart doing the same. And she says, it's all fake. So, okay, the reason she's still alive, and maybe even others are alive, is because of that antidote she gave herself. So again, I'm not sure if it cures the zombie virus or just holds it back from taking someone over, but yeah, that's why she's still alive here. So then we flip back to what is basically the fake reality that Wanda has created, right? Her fake hex covering the world, as both Kate and Riri are like, are you good? And Kamala is most definitely not good. So does that mean we're getting a season 2? I mean, I sure hope so. Brad Winderbaum himself has hinted that they know where the story would go if we get one. So let's cross our fingers we learn more. But I'll tell you someone that doesn't want a season 2, that would be Wanda. We get a last little jump scare, which is basically her saying, leave me alone. I've created my fake reality, and I want to live in it. So I thought this was a great way to end the season, definitely leaving us wanting more. But I do want to briefly mention, I brought this up in my earlier video on the zombies, that I don't think that What If Season 1's finale with the Guardians of the Multiverse is in any way tied to this particular zombie branch. So basically, remember, Strange Supreme brings in Wanda to basically cause a distraction with Infinity Ultron, and he ultimately blows everybody up, including that zombie Wanda. So I think this was a separate branch and is not tied to the Marvel Zombies. Likewise, it's a little hard to tell what to do with What If Season 2's finale. So basically, Strange Supreme brings in zombie Wanda once again. And this time it's Captain Carter and Cohorte who have to send her back. So basically, she launches an attack against the two of them, and it's Cohorte who opens a portal and basically sends Wanda back home again to wherever she came from. So this one could tie in with Marvel Zombies, but honestly, I'm going to call it a separate branch as well. Let me know your thoughts on that. But okay, final thing we need to do is now add Marvel Zombies to our overall timeline image. I know it's really busy. This is phase 4, but notice on the far right, right under What If, we can now add Marvel Zombies Season 1. But I will say this is one of the few times I might recommend watching something a little later than Marvel has it in the timeline, because you would want to be introduced to characters like Moon Knight, Hawkeye, Ironheart, and Ms. Marvel, and so watching it right after What If Season 1 might leave you a little confused. But anyway, this is where it is in the timeline. So, let me know your thoughts. What did you think about Marvel Zombies? I thought it was a really fun show, and I truly hope we get a season 2. But it doesn't matter what I think. I want to know what you think, because you know I love to read and respond to everything. Plus, don't forget, September contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And there's the membership option in case you're interested in that. And I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the Marvel Zombies spoiler section, talking about all the big reveals in the episodes. And I promised I'd talk about the Doomsday Countdown rewatch. Every day listed here at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll watch a different movie or show as we lead up to the December 18, 2026 release of Doomsday. So we have 2,400 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.